I tell you guys, I got to get myself some bumper music. Like, there's a lot of production upgrades I need to make on this show that I can have more than our normal 3 to 4 viewers that we're averaging each time. But aside from that, I think I need some bumper music. Back in the brass ring days, we had that little countdown going, and it would get me psyched up. There'd be times when I want to go through it like 2 or 3 times, and right now I just don't have any bumper music, and these openings are like super awkward. Like I never know when to start. I just hit let's go, and there we are. So hey everyone, what's up? I'm Rob, back at you in my regularly scheduled time slot. Took last week off. I want to say it's for the holiday because it kind of was, but it wasn't like I was doing anything celebrating the holiday as a whole. I was just behind throughout the week because of the holiday. So that's why I ended up not having a show last week. I'm sure you guys were all wondering about that. You guys were all asking around. Plenty of DMs, texts, emails, everyone wondering where I was at. That's where I was. Now you know. Now you freaking know. All right, we got that going there. Chat is live. You are live there. You are live there. Hey, Valentin. It has been a while. How's it going, Valentin? Shout out to Valentin, as I like to call him, Valentin from Russia. Valentin has been following me on the internet for, by my calculation, 9 years now, which is really cool. There's not a platform I have ever opened on the internet that Valentin hasn't been one of the first 5 subscribers to that platform, regardless of content. You might say along him and E are probably the 2 pillars of what I got going on here on Wrestling Internet. Before we talk wrestling, though, I'm consumed by this story in football. So right before, or I should say a little bit earlier this afternoon, I kept checking my phone, and I was looking for wrestling news because I wanted to see if anything broke before I went live with you guys. And so I kept scrolling. I take out the phone real quick at work, take out X, take out Blue Sky. That's where a lot of wrestling news is at. And I was looking. There was nothing that significant, which I guess makes sense because I think most of the roster is actually in the air today. So it would make sense that not a lot of news would break. But I kept seeing this NFL story about Bill Belichick not being in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And I was blown away by that. And this is not one of these things where it's like they're evaluating his playing career or something. No, this is the actual Hall of Fame. And the Hall of Fame voters to the Pro Football Hall of Fame that they take so damn seriously, they have said that Bill Belichick, on the first ballot, his first year of eligibility, which is a little funky with coaches and how they determine that, but nevertheless, on his first year of eligibility, not a first ballot Hall of Famer. And we know that Bill Polian and maybe Robert Kraft and other people in the room played a role in that decision. That is amazing. There is no place on the face of this earth that you cannot consider Bill Belichick a first ballot Hall of Famer. Remember a few years ago when there was all that debate about the WWE Hall of Fame? And we can still debate the merits of it, but it went to the effect of no Bruno, no Savage, no Hall of Fame. Now, as we know, all these years later, all those individuals are in the Hall of Fame. Bruno went in before he passed away. Obviously, Randy Savage went in many, many years after. But remember, there was all the talk over the years that, well, it's only the Observer Hall of Fame or the Cauliflower Alley Hall of Fame. Those are the ones that matter because the WWE Hall of Fame is really a company Hall of Fame and it exists in the mind of one man. That was always the narrative we got for many years, and it did seem to hold up, and I get that narrative. But you can't tell me that the Pro Football Hall of Fame has any more legitimacy than any other Hall of Fame out there, because it just straight up doesn't if Bill Belichick doesn't get in on the first ballot. Like I'd love to hear the reasoning on this and an explanation on why the hell that doesn't happen. Again, nothing to do with pro wrestling, but it made me think of the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fames that we have and the questions about those. And furthermore, it gets to this conversation because people talk about Hall of Fames. They're all political. They're all subject. They all have something in them that doesn't seem quite right. Hall of Fames, they're a nice thing. They're great to preserve history, but they really are something for the fans to make a little bit of cash off of. And I guess we're gonna have to wait another year to hear Bill Belichick's sterling speech. I'm sure that thing was gonna be great. We're on to North Carolina. That's what that thing would sound like. Super, super engaging. Then again, maybe what it was is like the Hall of Fame voters. They didn't want to spend the whole weekend around Jordan. Has anyone considered that could be part of it? Should we talk a little bit of wrestling? Kind of a big week coming up. You wouldn't really know that unless you tuned in maybe last night to Raw. Because it's not like WWE has been promoting the fact that one of their biggest events of the year is coming up right around the corner. It kind of feels like last Friday that they realized that they had a pay-per-view coming up and decided to book around it. Like even last Saturday night's main event, Stephanie was the only one on the side desk. Joe Tessitore was snowed out, as was Alicia Taylor going into last night's Raw. But she made the mention that tonight on Saturday night's main event, a mere 6 days or 7 days before the Rumble, that we were on the road to the Royal Rumble. I guess it's a pretty short road. It's a long flight. You got to go all the way to freaking Saudi Arabia, but it's a really short road this year to the Royal Rumble. And it made me think like, wow, WWE just doesn't really promote anything anymore, right? They didn't necessarily promote John Cena's last match, and with this big long-term stuff, they're doing this very quickly. We might get a major retirement angle. It seems like it came together in a couple of weeks. This is what they do these days. They don't promote much of anything. They just present, they get hype, and they hope the viral moments will hold. But despite WWE's seemingly like lack of enthusiasm for their own event, I personally love Rumble season. If you ask me just from the perspective not of an analyst, but as a wrestling fan of what my favorite pay-per-view is, it's the Rumble, like by far. I think the singles matches or the title matches on the Rumble are always very underrated. When you go back through history to some of the great matches for some of the titles in WWE, how many of those happened on the undercard or sometimes the main event of a Royal Rumble? On top of that, the Rumble match itself, it's the best thing to happen for the new year too. The way it's all like the fresh possibilities, the fresh matchups, the fresh feuds. Everyone's getting in. Everyone's getting a little bit of a sample. Hopefully you get to have a party, a Royal Rumble party, which, by the way, what does the Rumble party look like this year? Over here, where I'm at, in this time zone, the Royal Rumble pay-per-view starts at noon on Saturday. Now, as an over 30 talking about wrestling, I am going to join in on the train of everyone who always says, yes, earlier pay-per-views are better because our old asses got to get to sleep. We just don't have the stamina anymore for these shows. And like in the case of AEW, they still make them like 9 hours long. So the sooner you can start that, the sooner it'll be over. Now the shows are bad. Some of us can't handle it that much anymore. I don't think the Royal Rumble will be excessively long. In fact, WWE pay-per-views, if anything, are excessively short. But for me, I'm looking at an afternoon of the Royal Rumble. And then I got the rest of the day. Now, there was a time a couple of years ago before I reached this full maturity that I got going on now, where a Royal Rumble was an event that I would definitely 100% have to rewatch the next day. Like I'm talking about for a while. A lot of people take off Super Monday, which needs to be a holiday, by the way. Can we get on that? It seems like we don't got anything better to do in Washington. Can we make Super Monday a holiday? Personally, I used to take Royal Rumble Monday as a holiday. Not that I had anything planned to do on that day, other than, rewatch the show that I couldn't really remember the night before. Now it's not such a big issue because of said maturity that I've informed all of you about, and the fact that they do their pay-per-views on Saturdays. So if you need a day to recover, you got Sunday. Now, I don't know how any of us are going to recover from this time slot. If you're on the East Coast, it's starting at 2 for you. If you're in freaking California, the Royal Rumble is starting at 11 a.m. So what are you going to do? Is it the normal Royal Rumble party? Do we have beer? We have wings. We have predictions. We have polls. We have people that you invite over to watch wrestling twice a year. One of the 2 times you invite them over is for the Royal Rumble. What does an early Royal Rumble do to all those plans? Does it change things? I kind of feel like it's making life a little bit easier in some ways because it's like, yeah, I'm not stuck with this big bloated pay-per-view on an evening on a weekend like I normally am. At the same time, if you have any plans with me Saturday during the day, it's canceled because I'm going to be watching the Royal Rumble. I don't know what the libations will look like. I don't plan on going live in relation to the Royal Rumble, so who knows what could be in this red can Saturday. The Rumble's a big event, and I like when the Rumble falls on this weekend in particular. To me, the Royal Rumble is meant to fall on the weekend between Championship Sunday in the NFL and Super Bowl Sunday. I know that's a very American-centric calendar, but despite being a global company, they do operate in the good old USA. And I used to really hate it when we'd have like a Championship Sunday, and your brain is just completely bloated from all the football you've been ingesting. And then your brain has to switch. Your brain has to switch immediately to Royal Rumble mode. That's taxing on us, the lazy, who just sit in front of the TV all day. Okay, so that's a lot to do. So I like whenever you split them in between like this. I will say, though, there are some questions I have going into this year's Royal Rumble. And instead of doing a full-on prediction, I just want to ask about 5 questions about this event, and maybe in the chat you can get at some of your responses, put them down in the comment section. We're going to go through about 5 sections. Speaking of the chat, let me catch up on it a little bit. Oh no, for sure, Valentin. And it's funny because I think as wrestling fans we feel an obligation to be completists and to watch everything. That's the only way to follow the product. I really think the product, though, in order to be enjoyed, has to be done piecemeal. You have to find what you like and then dig into it. Not everyone has to have a wrestling podcast or talk about it all the time. You don't have to watch everything. And I wish more people would take that. All right, so let me get to my questions I have. These are my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 burning questions, you might say, going into the Royal Rumble. First up, will Sami be the Saudi D-Bry? Now, what the hell does all that mean? Let me explain. As we all know, after we began the road to the Royal Rumble last Saturday, that really began with Sami Zayn predictably winning the Fatal 4-Way to become the number 1 contender to Drew McIntyre's title, getting the match on Saturday in Saudi Arabia. Significance to that is, obviously he's not from Saudi Arabia, but there's this sort of hometown feel that is attached to Sami when he goes to Saudi Arabia. Remember the first show when he wasn't allowed on the card because there was like threats to his life? Those were interesting times, weren't they? Oh, how things have changed. With that said, I think with these Saudi premium live events, the major ones, there's always been a peg that he was going to do something pretty big on one of these shows. I think before we knew that we were getting our Saudi Arabian WrestleMania, a lot of people really pegged it that Sami's going to win the Rumble in Saudi Arabia, and that's going to be the big start of his big push, which will culminate in him winning the title at WrestleMania, which if you follow any Sami Zayn promo for about the last year, that's all he's really talked about. Well, as it stands out, it doesn't look like he's actually in the Rumble match. He's in a title match for what is like the main title, and given everything we've had with CM Punk in the last couple of weeks, I don't think he's necessarily defending on the show. Could be wrong. There could be something added in the next couple of days, but I doubt it. So the big men's singles match, title match, will be Sami challenging against Drew McIntyre, an opponent he's like never beaten, and the commentary has been quick to point that out. Now, if I had to guess, the big coronation for Sami, it's coming next year at Saudi Arabia. That's a hell of a gamble, though, for a guy who's already 41, that we're going to wait till next year to have his big moment. There are so many moving parts and things that change and all that stuff. Jeez. Mute button, where are you? Can't find you. Swig of cola for the working man there. Like I said, there's no guarantee that Sami will even be in the plans 2 months from now. You never know how these things can change. So that's a heck of a long-term gamble. But I hope it pays off for them. I like Sami as a performer and want good things for him. Although I will say, it's okay if Sami never gets his moment. That can be part of his character. Attaining that top spot, I know it's been given to maybe too many people in the opinion of some, but it's okay if it's not achieved by everyone. It makes it special. So I think nobody reasonably thinks feel free to disagree. Let me know in the chat. That Drew is going to get the victory on Saturday. I think it's clear that he's going to get the victory. Maybe it'll be a big heat moment. Maybe it's not. But I don't think there's any expectation, some may have, that he will enter the Royal Rumble, and thus he's not going to win the Royal Rumble. Now, in any other Rumble situation, think 2014, 2015, the crowd might hijack the entire show if Sami didn't win either match. I don't think that's going to be the case here. While I think the Saudi crowd really is into Sami, they're into a lot of the things they're seeing. They seem to be pretty fervent about the product in general. We don't know yet how closely everything is followed and all the insider stuff and all that. So I don't know if the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is going to go like the night after WrestleMania 29 and hijack the stadium. In fact, I would almost guarantee you that's not going to happen. So I don't think it's going to be the case, but there is a slight risk there. There's a slight risk on souring the whole evening if there is a segment of the crowd there that is dead set on Sami winning. Now, unlike the Daniel Bryan years that I'm kind of referencing here with 2014 and 2015, I think everyone in the arenas each night in Philadelphia and in Pittsburgh really thought that Daniel Bryan was supposed to win the Royal Rumble matches on those respective evenings. He wasn't even in the one in 2014. Poor Rey Mysterio had to get booed, leave the company, and get rehabbed because of that decision. And then he's in the Rumble, as we all know, in 2015. We talked about it a couple weeks ago. He had his dreams shattered midway through the match, so nobody would remember him at the end of the match. Ask Rock and Roman Reigns how that turned out. I don't think Sami's going to take over the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia this Saturday, but it is an interesting little nugget to watch and to follow for this next year. Where exactly does his career go? Have they missed his moment? Have they waited just long enough? Or is it okay if he never has it? Let me take a swig so I don't, like I did on the last point, and then I'll get to the next one. There we are. All right, my next burning question. Are we really going to have 30 women in the Royal Rumble match in PJs? And I had to give some context here. There was a time when 30 women in a single match would probably mean that they were wearing lingerie. So I guess shout out to the progressive Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for putting all these women in PJs. Like actual PJs. Now, some really pull it off. We saw Rhea Ripley a couple of years ago wearing an outfit that looked almost identical to what she wears to the ring all the time. So they have made some progress since Lacey Evans was out there in that super, super baggy thing, or Sasha Banks and Alexa Bliss wrestling in these giant blankets, basically, because God forbid any skin show in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Remember when they ran the video package that had that one shot of Sasha for a second and they had to apologize? Somehow those were simpler times than we're in now. It's crazy. And I'll be honest, I'm kind of over the conversation about WWE doing their events in Saudi Arabia. I don't think it's a great thing, but boy, Saudi Arabia sure did their homework by doing what a lot of media does and have pro wrestling kind of test the waters out first and then bring everyone else in. Now there's so much sports and entertainment that is so directly tied up with Saudi Arabia. It's no longer that the shady wrestling company is going down there to take a big check and provide propaganda. Now it's our entire country is doing that. So I guess we could just, join in all the fun. Or I guess we should say it's not really fair to just single out WWE for their sports washing. And if you want to take it a step further, in this country, who the hell are we to lecture others about the ethical behavior of their government? With all of that said, remember when the conversation was not necessarily about human rights or any of that when it came to the performance of the sports washing in Saudi Arabia. What it came down to the initial time when they initially went over there was about the women not being able to be on the card at all. Because if you recall, women were not allowed on these cards at all on the first couple of shows. In fact, we had to get Renee Young over there doing commentary, dressed in the old black with her hands covered. She had the unique travel schedule, all of that. Well, we found a solution to not having women on the card. We put all the women in these PJs. Now, it's funny enough when the women are only involved in 2 matches in the show. There's, in general, there's a big enough roster. I think the women can have more to do on these shows, and I think it would help freshen up the card. But in this case, you have the entire roster in one match. How ridiculous are some of these outfits going to get? And it's one thing. If these women have a wardrobe malfunction stateside, there's going to be some camera trickery. There was a time when I know they used to get it was a certain fine that they would get for any wardrobe malfunction. I don't believe that's the case anymore, but I could be wrong. But it's a whole different scenario and you're in Saudi Arabia and not trying to show skin. And by skin, I mean like your wrist. And so who knows the elaborate outfits they're going to be involved in? Who knows the weird wrestling that's going to happen because of this? And it's a Royal Rumble too. So those matches are weird and awkward sometimes anyway. I am like locked in to the 30 women in PJ's Royal Rumble. Couple more to go. Next question. Will the new blood make a difference? No, not that new blood. Not the one from WCW. I mean the new blood that we have now in WWE. WWE, let's face it, it feels really old right now. Like it's an age roster that has basically all wrestled each other for the last 3 years. They need something new. Not necessarily something younger, although that would be helpful, but just something newer and fresher at the top. And there's a few spots where it feels like they're trying. I'm looking at you specifically, Obafemi and Braun Breaker. Braun Breaker seems to be the main character of this Rumble, and that person usually wins the match. We'll see what happens. I'm not going to make an official prediction because that would be the prediction, and it doesn't feel like that well thought out of a prediction. Someone who I don't think is going to win, but I think needs to have a great showing is Obafemi, because they are hyping him up as this being the big debut of Obafemi as a main roster member. He's been on the main roster, obviously, and had that match with Cody, but this is the debut of him being a main roster member. I'm not saying Braun or Obafemi or even Jacob Fatu have to win. What I'm saying is these guys have to have a great showing, and what they do has to mean something. It can't just be like a Maven moment where you do something shocking, you eliminate someone, and it's a big deal, and then it goes away. Enough with the moments. WWE is all about the moments. Can we get a moment that at least lasts 3 to 4 to 5 months? So I need them to do something of consequence, not just be around at the Royal Rumble. They like to do this with young guys, where they'll have someone who's on the come up who you might peg as a future champion, and they'll have them last 35, 40, even go the whole way in the Rumble. But they don't do anything in the Rumble. They're just there. I don't want that. We need some moments, especially with this new crop. If it's guys like Jacob, guys like Oba, guys like Braun Breaker. Those are power guys who throw people around. That's what a Royal Rumble is. It's a bunch of power guys throwing people around. There's no reason why there can't be a showcase here. Now, I think the whole Vision storyline with the entire Vision being in the match does kind of complicate things from just a pure prediction standpoint, but it also will add probably some intrigue to the match. Regardless, I need us to be talking about one of these under 40 wrestlers after the Royal Rumble. We talk a lot about the same 5 to 6 guys. It is time for some daylight. This year, 2026, needs to be a transition year for WWE. And this Saturday could be the first step. Okay. Second to last one. Penultimate, some would say. Will Roman gain traction? I feel like last Friday, Roman was the first person actually announced for the Rumble. And the Rumble's this Saturday. So again, maybe Roman called them up and reminded them that like they had a pay-per-view to promote. Maybe that's how this whole thing got rolling. But beyond that, like it's that announcement of Roman Reigns was probably like the most significant thing that happened on TV for him in the last like 18 months. He has no momentum. He gains no traction. And he only works like 6 matches a year. So whatever he does in the Royal Rumble has to be meaningful. Because like whatever he does is probably going to take up his time for the rest of the year. So they've got to get it right. And I'll be honest, I have no idea what pathway they're going to go on with him. But he needs to gain some momentum. He needs to have something in his character other than the bloodline and the fall of that title and that whole storyline wrap up. That was great. Changed WWE. Cornerstone storyline in a boom period. So I would have a hard time letting go of that storyline. But given the frequency that Roman works, he's not really coming across anymore as a rarely seen special attraction. Instead, he's kind of starting to reek of like a relic that we see every now and then, a piece of the past to help us remember a different time, sort of a legend that we're deferential towards. And someday Roman Reigns does deserve that status. But I think that he has so much more that he can offer right now, and they have so much more creatively that they can do with him, that honestly, if he's going to have another nothing year like he did in 2025, I'm not so sure what the hell we need Roman around for anymore. And lastly, will we say goodbye to AJ Styles? This is the main storyline, I think, in all of WWE right now. Last week, when the retirement stipulation was announced, I could have gone either way, but I figured that AJ Styles is getting out of the Royal Rumble with the victory. That was my initial gut reaction when that was announced on Raw. But everything that's happened in the last week or so has kind of led me to believe that this will be the end for him. Let's actually recap this year for AJ Styles. And we're 27 days into the year. He nearly beat Gunther on Raw, got the visual win on him, had a really good TV match with Shinsuke Nakamura, and a not so entertaining but big match against CM Punk last night on Raw. And now, Saturday, he's got his career on the line against Gunther. They sandwiched like 6 months of a retirement storyline into 27 days. AJ's made no bones about it. He's going to retire in 2026. Is WWE his final destination in his wrestling career? I'm going to say no. I think he's going to wrestle somewhere else before the year is over. And all the talk from later last year that his contract went through February, it would make sense that they'd be winding him down right here. But I'll be honest, I have no idea what they're going to do. Again, they're building it pretty strong and implying that he would retire. Not since really, I would say, Flair in 08, have they really gone so ham on forecasting the results of a retirement match. That's how you knew in 2013 Triple H was not going to retire against Brock Lesnar. There was no fanfare to that being like a retirement thing for him. They didn't like bring out Steph and the kids, and I don't know who else they did bring out Shawn. He was a part of that match. But like, if Triple H could have retired in a different way than he did with the health issues coming out of the pandemic and all that, 100%. He's got the full Ric Flair, Sting, John Cena retirement treatment. That's how you knew in 2013 he wasn't retiring. 2008, they almost flat out said it. Like they put Flair in the Hall of Fame the night before. You had all his family, all the people from his past all around. The implication was that it was gonna be Flair's last match, which really wasn't. But that's another story for another day. It could all be a work. Everything they're doing, they could be working us, or this could be just a storyline for Unreal, because that's another canon we always have to contend with now when we're analyzing this stuff. Either way, I think this kind of works. It's a good outcome from them either way. They can get some very legitimate heat on Gunther now, more so than they did on the past. Now, I was an advocate for what they did at Saturday Night's Main Event. I've been less of an advocate for Gunther just being the troll and them kind of feels like not losing the momentum they had, but not completely seizing on it. Even though AJ Styles is a much lesser star and not quite nowhere near the icon that John Cena was, I think the heelish thing of beating him in the retirement match, especially if it's done through nefarious means, that's a way to really sustain some heat on Gunther. So if they go that route, that's the way to do it. And I'll be honest with you, I don't hate the idea of AJ finishing his career outside of WWE. If he goes to New Japan, if he goes to AEW, if he makes appearances in TNA and ROH. I know many of those are owned by other companies, but any of those would be great. Does he have a little GCW appearance? I would love to see all that, and I think that would be a perfect cap on his career. And 10 years in WWE, he's definitely served his time in that company. Or this is really good pro wrestling and they're working us. Either way, good on them. So those are my 5 burning questions. What are your questions going into the Rumble? Sound off in the chat or the comments. Let me take another swig of my water. And then I want to talk about some Royal Rumble losers. Yeah, see, this is a weird thing I'm doing. I'm checking my phone during the show, not to like check up on how many viewers we have or, do a sound check. I'm assuming being that Valentin's been responding to what I was saying. I'm assuming you all can hear me, but, assumptions can be what they are. That's so Valentin, to your point, Valentin put there in the chat, kind of weird to retire in Saudi Arabia. I agree to a point, but if it's not his actual retirement from wrestling, I think AJ probably would want to retire. I don't know where AJ would really want to retire. If you would think somewhere in the South, close to where he's from. You think like a big show, maybe at the Georgia Dome or something like that would be like idyllic for a full-on Styles career retirement. It is weird, and that's the whole thing with all these Saudi shows that we're kind of talking around. It's going to come up next year at the Rumble. I'm sure there are people who are traveling to these events, and we've talked before about how the tickets may be ridiculous stateside for some of these WWE shows, but boy, you can get a good deal if you want to go see them in Saudi Arabia. So there will be some of the normal, Royal Rumble travel. If Smiley Face Shirt Guy is front row at this show, then that guy, there's nothing that guy can't do. But that's why I think like what you're saying, Valentin, it could lead to it not happening. Or if he retires at the Rumble, it's simply his exit from WWE. And it is at the Rumble, and we may not care about it in this way, but those Saudi events are essentially their biggest shows of the year in front of their biggest clientele of the year, and their most valuable clientele, I should say. So I think in the eyes of everyone involved, that would be considered a big retirement on a big stage. But I think that the variable of Saudi Arabia changes a lot of things in how we're looking at all of this for the Rumble, and then I think it's going to change a ton throughout all of next year as we build towards WrestleMania. On the hold on. I started out excuse me. I started out the show talking about Bill Belichick not being let into the WWE. Yeah, I can confirm that. I can confirm that this year Bill Belichick will not make the WWE Hall of Fame. Aggregate me. Let me start that whole sentence over again. I started out the show talking about Bill Belichick not being inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. So that's not exactly the sports news I was kind of thinking about. I've been more thinking about what we got on Championship Sunday. As I mentioned earlier, I love it when the Rumble is sandwiched between Championship Sunday and Super Bowl Sunday. That's the right weekend for the Royal Rumble. Even better now that it's on a Saturday. Although, don't you get the sneaky, creepy suspicion that eventually the Rumble is going to be a 2-day event? I don't hate that, actually. I'll take a 2-day Rumble over a 2-day Mania. Because the Rumble has these two 30-person matches that take up so much of the show and so much of the roster, that I think that's the pay-per-view you actually could get 2 nights out of. But we'll deal with that 2 years from now when you got to pay triple the price for one night or something ridiculous. Regardless, like I said, championship weekend leads into the Royal Rumble, leads into the Super Bowl, which then we take a little March Madness detour and we end up at WrestleMania. Good times, opening day of baseball, right into the NBA playoffs. Yes, I think of the year around the sports and wrestling calendar. But these couple of days after Championship Sunday, before we get to Super Bowl week, it doesn't tend to be as much about who won the games and the Super Bowl matchup, that's what we spend next week doing. That's what Radio Row is for. It's for hawking stuff and talking about that same matchup. Now, what we tend to talk about in these couple of days after Championship Sunday are the teams that didn't get it done, the teams that lost. How much discussion have we heard this week about Jarrett Stidham? How much have we heard about Sean Payton and that horrible call he made on 4th down? It's been all the rage on the talk, right? Or how much have we heard about Matthew Stafford and Sean McVay, in other respects having a great game, but not getting it done when it seemed like a real opening for them as a team, given this year's construction. So spent a lot of time in sports discourse over the last couple of days talking about the losers, the ones who finished essentially 3rd and 4th place in the NFL season. Now, maybe there'll be time to talk later about the Super Bowl losers, but for now, when you talk about a championship game loser, they didn't make it to get to the big game. Essentially, 29 competitors in each Rumble have that same position. They didn't win the match that gets them to the big match. Now, unlike pro wrestling these days, there's like 2 or 3, or unlike pro football, there's like 2 or 3 big matches at WrestleMania, or main event matches. Yes, the night 2 main event is the main event, but let's be honest, like I said, there's 29 losers and 1 winner in the Rumble, so there's other ways to have a big featured spot at Mania. And so with those things in mind, I kind of started thinking about it. And I started thinking, like, is it ever better to not win the Rumble? And I know a lot of people have had great years from not winning the Rumble, but in particular, what if you're the person eliminated? What if you're the person that causes the other person to go on to the next level? You're the Rams, or you're the Broncos, the person that loses to the people that are going to the championship. That's essentially what the Royal Rumble runner-up does every year. So I went through and I looked at, I wouldn't say every year, I looked for the last 30 years, going back to 1996. 1996 is 30 years ago, people. We all remember something in 1996. That was 30 years ago. Yeah, you can tell by this crap going on up here that was 30 years ago, and my fondness for it. So look back at the last 30 men's Royal Rumble, because the larger sample size than the women's one. And what I came up with was at least 5 instances, and there's a few more. There's one other one that's very obvious, but it only happened like last year, so I'm not going to bring it up. 5 instances where you can say that the runner-up in the Royal Rumble arguably had a better year or more interesting year than the winner of the Royal Rumble. And it kind of hits on this point, like, is that really the coronation? Was Jey Uso really coronated last year by winning the Royal Rumble, or was it just another spot in the storyline? Well, I'm going to break down 5 times that the Royal Rumble runner-up seemed to make out okay. Let me switch things over right here. Talking out loud like I'm sure you guys will love. All right. First up, let's go to 1996. 30 years ago. Now, 30 years ago, the Royal Rumble was a super interesting match. I've actually been really deep diving into a lot of things 96, just because, 96, 2016, 06, I guess 86. But I'm not diving into as much mid-80s these days. But I've been diving into a lot of 86. And that Rumble was wild. That Rumble was one where they were bringing in all kinds of people from the outside. Vader was the big scary that they were bringing in. They brought in Vader. They advertised Sabu, but he didn't pan out. Mick Foley wasn't quite there yet, although I'm sure they would have really loved to have had him in that match. And then like Steve Austin's not quite the star that he's supposed to be just yet. Fake Diesel is one of the last few people in this match. There's a lot going on in the 96 Rumble. And as you can see, it was a pretty cool finish. For the second year in a row, Shawn Michaels won the match. Super kicked Diesel right over the top rope, like flipped him right around. It was a great elimination. What did Michaels do throughout the year? Well, he actually had a pretty good year if you break it down. In fact, maybe one of the best years of his career. he parlayed that Rumble win into the main event of WrestleMania that year, where he went an hour with Bret Hart. Now, personally, I'm not that big a fan of that match. It's kind of a polarizing match, but it's a very important match, and it's an hour-long match at a WrestleMania. That's a hell of an accomplishment. And the weight of the company was on his shoulders. And we all know how well they did business-wise in 1996. Essentially, 96 is the year that Shawn kind of cracked at the top, and it was the final breaking point for the company before they were forced to go into their new direction, which led to their next boom period. It actually ended, his title reign ended, with Shawn Michaels losing to Sid at Survivor Series and honestly getting booed in the process. That crowd at the Garden was more than happy to see Sid take out the Heartbreak Kid and crown him as champion. Now, as we talked about before, Sid couldn't even show up to like the press conference the next day for the next year's Royal Rumble, and immediately they realized that was kind of a bad choice. And the whole point that they did it was so Shawn wouldn't have the belt going into the Rumble in San Antonio so he could win it back from Sid. That's the only reason why he really lost it. But it was really this whole thing of the weight of the world is on his shoulders, and I think he cracked under that weight of the world. On the other hand, you could also be this guy. You could be Big Diesel, Kevin Nash. Now, yeah, he got eliminated from the Royal Rumble. He also lost his WrestleMania match against The Undertaker. Most people used to. But then he was gone from the company. And this isn't really fair because he was in a different company, so it's really not fair to judge his efficacy post-Royal Rumble in the same context as Shawn's. But while Shawn was, holding the weight of the company and maybe not succeeding there and having all these personal issues and not getting along with people and all this stuff, Kevin Nash was busy changing wrestling forever. Showing up after Razor Ramon on Nitro, causing all this confusion, causing lawsuits from WWE, getting himself double, triple favored nations contracts as a result of all this. The guy got a raise because they teased Diesel, fake Diesel on TV. Real Diesel got a raise in another company because of that. He wrestled probably like 6 times. Hottest thing in wrestling. Changed the wrestling business. We are still recovering from everything Kevin Nash did to change the wrestling business in 1996. So yes, HBK might have had a career year in 96, but Kevin Nash Kevin Nash changed wrestling in 96. That really can't compare. Let's flash forward 1 year. 1997. Now I'm going to kind of cheat on this one because I have ended this analysis in my head and I put both guys as having the better year at different times. That fits the 97 Royal Rumble because I don't actually consider it an Austin win. I know Austin officially got the victory, but he essentially was the runner-up. Hart was the runner-up, and you can say that he essentially got the victory, but that's also not quite fair to him. Neither one ended up in the main event of WrestleMania, despite stealing the show at WrestleMania together. So I'm going to call this one kind of a push, but I think it's really interesting how neither of these guys you can maybe say had great years and also had like the most important years of their career. So after the Rumble and after WrestleMania 13 in particular, although the momentum was already headed that way, Austin really gets started in the biggest push of his career, which we know that huge push almost gets derailed at SummerSlam when Bret Hart is winning the title. Steve Austin's neck is being broken by Bret's brother Owen. Unintentionally, of course, but that's what was happening. Stopped everything dead in its tracks. He basically has 2 more matches till the next year's WrestleMania and his big coronation. Everything could have gone away right there when that happened. Just brutal. Look at that. How often do you think Austin watches that? Because I mean, we all know of all the wrestlers, Austin had the hardest time coming to terms with his retirement. And his career was shortened so significantly because of this pile driver. Meanwhile, I don't know though if you can say that Bret really had the bigger year. In some ways he did, and in some ways he didn't. because he also goes on, has a great match at WrestleMania, steals the show along with Steve Austin. He then becomes champion over the summer. He then signs a massively lucrative deal with WCW. He's also the recipient, not of that, he's the recipient of the Montreal Screwjob, which, had he maybe have gone to any other company other than the very competently ran WCW, they would have got the hottest wrestler in the world. Instead, he was a special guest referee for like a Larry Zbyszko match or something like that. That's how they handled that. As Jim Cornette would say, that's a tribute to their competence. Austin gets the broken neck, but he also gets the feud with McMahon out of it. Now, you're seeing here the stunner that I'm putting up there from 97. That's not related to anything that happened with Montreal. But because of Montreal, that also created the massive hill for Austin to feud against. I'm going to say they both won and they both lost in this scenario. Super, super interesting, but it fits kind of the dynamic of the weird Rumble and who really won. So I'm going to skip through the rest of the Attitude Era because there wasn't a lot of other great examples. The only other example that would really work would be 1999 when Austin was the runner-up to Vince winning. But Vince winning really isn't really like a serious thing, and it's hard to compare who had a better year to the owner. But if we were going strictly in kayfabe, I think the Vince McMahon character probably had a more successful 99 than Steve Austin did. Steve Austin gets like vehicular homicided at the end of that year. Well, Vince's kids hate him at the end of the year, but then they reunite with him. So, and he became the higher power, or the Howard power, as Undertaker would say. Bush. So we will skip through all of the Attitude Era, and we will go to 2005. 05. Now, this is another infamous final two because this was the final two a few times. Back in 1994, WWE consciously booked a dual winning finish to the Royal Rumble. Lex Luger and Bret Hart both won simultaneously to further the storyline. In 2005, Cena and Batista did the same damn thing, but without any storyline implication. They just legitimately eliminated each other at the same time. And I've Zapruder filmed the hell out of this. I think I determined one time whose foot hits quicker, but I can't recall. I can't recall at this time. Regardless, it was as close as it could be that, Vince ran out there, tore his quads famously, pure chaos. The match gets restarted, and Batista ends up eliminating Cena. Now, they would both go on to WrestleMania and win their brands' respective titles. 05 was really the coronation of like the next generation of WWE. Edge, Orton, Batista, and Cena are all in real prominent spots against really prominent opponents. In particular, Cena and Batista, as I said, win the respective titles of their brands. And that's where it all kind of switches. So Batista did not have a bad 05, but he also didn't have a great one. I think it's most notable for all the matches he had at WrestleMania and throughout up until the Hell in a Cell match, 3 in total, where he beat Triple H cleanly 3 pay-per-views in a row. Some people might call this the end of the Reign of Terror, which I think that's probably an appropriate spot to bookmark it. And it was ended with an exclamation point. It was ended with no doubt that Triple H was the worst wrestler in kayfabe as compared to Dave Batista. Can you name one other thing he did in 2005, though, outside of the Triple H related storylines? The only other thing you're probably going to remember is that he went over to SmackDown. It doesn't have that much significance. And if you go back and look at what he did, all he really did was he had a fun summer with Eddie Guerrero right before Eddie passed away. He had a Survivor Series match, he had another tag match, and then early in 06, he's injured anyway. Regardless, though, the move to SmackDown, maybe this wasn't intentional, but it clearly signaled that he was the number 2 at that point. Going into WrestleMania that year, Batista was the number 1, Cena was the number 2. That flipped. And a lot of it can be attributed to what I referenced earlier, the draft of 2005. And it's funny, back in 05, there had only ever been one other draft since the initial brand split in 2002. And this was huge. The 2 champions traded show. Remember, Cena did it first. So like SmackDown didn't have a champion for a few months it was Raw just hit the jackpot. JR had the big call. Now, some of you may argue with this selection as Cena having the much better year than Batista because 05 is when the Cena character kind of started to crack also. The feuds with Jericho and Angle didn't help him in getting cheered. In fact, they kind of got him booed and cemented this polarizing character that he would have for like the next 20 years. But I also think in some ways that was the best thing that ever happened to John Cena also. 05 was the year that John Cena was, I think, officially selected and crowned as the top guy. It would take him really to maybe like 08 or 09 till that was fully thrust upon him and he could really make that claim. But the start of it was 05. And there's no question to me, if you look at the end of the year into the pecking order, where these guys were at, Cena was here, Batista was here. And it remained that way despite being on top of everyone else. It remained that way for the remainder of their careers. Although I think in Hollywood, Batista's got the edge there. Cena's creeping up on him. And I think they're both better actors than The Rock, which is crazy. Nine years into the future, one of the most infamous Royal Rumble events ever, 2014. This is funny because it's Batista eliminating Roman Reigns, but it's a completely different even though it's like Roman Reigns fully formed Shield Roman Reigns, completely different Roman Reigns. And all the context around it is completely different. So if we look back though at 2014, Roman Reigns was the second to last person eliminated. And yes, this is pre the Roman Reigns babyface turn that we're in currently. But Roman Reigns was so loudly cheered. And once the fans realized that Daniel Bryan wasn't going to be in the match and they kind of calibrated for any of their other favorites, that fan base was all about Roman Reigns crowning the next guy, coronating him, putting the belt on him, at least giving him the Rumble win. They wanted something different. Kind of like it was feeling right now. Everything was feeling really stale, and the new things that were being offered were new things from 11 years ago. That's what Batista represented. Nobody wanted that. Everyone wanted Daniel Bryan in the main event. And then if you recall what the main event was planned to be, it was Orton versus Batista in like a straight up match. And Vince apparently just could not believe how his fan base was not on board with that. Amazing. It's not Batista's fault that this run went so bad. Like he's talked about it before. And if you analyze it, he was put in a horrible, horrible position to the point that when it was all said and done, wrestling fans stopped holding it against him. It's rare that wrestling fans will completely put it all in the booking, especially for one of these bigger guys. It's one of the corporate picks. But I think people empathized enough with Batista's situation that by the end, in terms of the online fans that would watch a show like this, they were at least sympathetic to him. But we can never forget. We can never let go of Blue Tista. That's how this run ended. This run ended with Blue Tista. And to put another finer point on what I'm talking about here, it was also the case that Roman Reigns and the Shield were involved in all those matches against Evolution at the end of Batista's run, and it was often Roman getting the pin over Batista. So there was a direct correlation here, despite the non-win of the Rumble. Now, Roman's year wasn't perfect, but it was pivotal. As you can see here, 2014 is the year that the Shield broke up. Storyline, like fallout that we're still dealing with today. Triple H certainly hasn't let it go. The whole Vision storyline seemingly was some sort of recreation of like Evolution and this smashed together. Which, I mean, I guess Seth kind of joined Evolution, but they called themselves the Authority when this was all said and done. But that moment for the Shield had different consequences for the different members. It was great for Seth. It was really good for Roman. Not so much for Dean. Dean was on the outside looking in when all this went down, but that was the moment that WWE sort of signaled, oh, Roman's the main eventer now. And that was one of the problems. They immediately elevated him, and Dean was the one that was still mad about the Shield. And meanwhile, it's like Roman just graduated. But he had a good year leading up, after that we don't talk about as much. He won the Money in the Bank. He had a solid match against Randy Orton at SummerSlam. He did get injured shortly after, and that killed his momentum quite a bit and really changed a lot of the course of his career. Because by the end of 2014, it felt like people were really aware that he was going to be the next push guy and they were ready to turn on him. They hadn't quite done it yet. And I don't know when exactly the declare promo happens. I know it's in the lead up to the Royal Rumble. I always thought it's in December, so I think it was this year, but I can't remember when he declared for the Royal Rumble. But it was kind of the mixture of all that, and then once we get to the Royal Rumble in Philadelphia, not even The Rock could save him on that night. But 2014, he definitely, from a WWE perspective, had a better year than Batista. Last up, 2018. Pop quiz, men's or women's. Can you name for me who won each Royal Rumble in 2018? This is where we insert the Jeopardy music. Yeah, I didn't think so. Probably because neither one of them won their WrestleMania match. You have two Rumbles and neither one of them win their respective match. Really does a good job of selling. It's like the Money in the Bank, where there was a streak where there wasn't a successful cash in for like 4 years in a row. I get you need to switch it up and not always do the same thing, but after a while, it does kind of kill the gimmick to an extent. Yeah, that was our final two in 2018. Shinsuke Nakamura and Roman Reigns. Now, if you go down the history of the Royal Rumble, 2014, this was not the case. 2014, Roman Reigns was a young up-and-comer that was given like that showcase spotlight. In fact, a lot of that was him not doing a whole lot, but he was in the Rumble for a really long time. He was in the Rumble a really long time in 2016 too, but that was a whole different storyline purpose. He kind of hung out in the back while Vince's goons were beating him up. And then he came back out just to get eliminated by Triple H. All in a night's work for the real man. But no, after 2014, basically, it feels like Roman's role in the Royal Rumble for like 5 years was to strike fear in the fans that he would win. That was his storyline. So like he would be one of the last two because it's always believable that he could get the win. Because of course, it's Roman, he's gonna get pushed. So you can always believe that he can get the Rumble win. It's funny enough now, I don't think he's gonna win this year. But if we're on here next week and we're talking about a Roman Reigns Royal Rumble win, not shocked at all. Not shocked at all. Don't think it's going to happen. I just wouldn't be shocked. It was a cool last few people in 2018. The 2018 Men's Rumble, I think it's been forgotten about a lot for many reasons. It was also earlier on the card. For the women got the main event spot that night. That's when was that when Ronda Rousey came in? Might have been the year before. No, it is. Yeah. So 2018 WrestleMania is when she has the tag match. So yeah. So Ronda Rousey you had to save the win for the end because Ronda Rousey made her big appearance confronting Asuka and Charlotte when all that was said and done. Nonetheless, on the men's side, you had a cool juxtaposition throughout that entire match. There was that one scene where you had, I think it was Mysterio, Orton, and Cena on one side. And I don't remember who they were, but a bunch of more modern superstars on the other. And it was like, it just kind of happened that those two eras were mixed. And there's a lot of that in that match. But that was the year 2018 where it's like, oh, this is probably leading. If he wins the match and we're doing the math and AJ's the champ, we could get AJ versus Shinsuke in America. Oh, all of us nerds on the internet, we were all about that. Telling anyone who would listen that this is going to be the match that's going to change wrestling, just like it did in Japan a couple of years ago. We were all right about that, weren't we? Again, I'm not talking much about AJ's 2018 because I can only remember him doing one thing after winning this Rumble. And it was basically having this sequence over and over again with AJ Styles. So Shinsuke's win at the Rumble in 18 didn't lead to a main event push. It led to like 4 matches against AJ Styles where he hit him in the junk every match. And that became the main storyline of that entire feud. The matches were like good-ish, but they were just super long. And the whole time you're watching them, waiting for them to turn into the match you saw in New Japan a couple years ago. Now, I talked about that match a couple weeks ago. I actually rewatched it again this weekend. Honestly, for bad reasons. I watched it this weekend so I could troll the match they were going to have on Saturday night's main event. They ended up having a really solid match, a really good, like if they would have had the match they had on Saturday at WrestleMania, I don't think I'd be talking about this Rumble win in the same way. But at that time, it wasn't going to happen for Shinsuke. And honestly, it kind of killed his career. He never really recovered from there. I want to say at Survivor Series, he's like in an intercontinental title level, which he faces Seth Rollins, which isn't the worst thing in the world, but that sort of put him down a peg. He started off from a bad spot the year before by feuding with Jinder Mahal and not getting the victory. Let's be honest there. But this was supposed to be like his big coronation after that, and it never really hit traction. So it really just used as a win for a storyline purpose to get him to this match, which the match seemed to really be about the other person more. Now, Roman, on the other hand, also didn't have a great 2018, but I would say he had a better 2018 than Shinsuke did. So 2018, it's another weird one for Roman. He's the runner-up in the Rumble, but he ends up main eventing WrestleMania because he's the big dog against Brock Lesnar. Now, Roman and Brock have faced at many WrestleManias, many other pay-per-views. Kind of get the feeling they may meet again here pretty soon. They're both around the company as we speak. Again, the reports that it looks like Brock will be at the Rumble, which isn't too big of a surprise. But they had like their worst WrestleMania main event, like their weirdest of all their main events they've been together. Like 31 was a weird atmosphere with everything that was going on there, but that's a really fun main event. And the ones that they had that closed out the feud, and the ones where they played with like the Tonka trucks the whole time, those were fun. Those were great. I like those. This match at WrestleMania in 2018, which I want to say it's 34, that was a weird atmosphere. I wasn't there. A lot of you guys were. I know Zach was, and a few other people were there. That was weird because everyone just hated that main event. Everyone was so done with that show and was so done with the Roman push at that point. And remember, it was like sad Roman after that. It was like Roman was basically doing his best affectation of Bret Hart in 97, basically saying he got screwed all the time. But it was weird because he wasn't turning heel, so it was just a babyface that was complaining all the time. It was like the 50th misstep in that whole babyface run. But by SummerSlam 2018, that's actually, and it seemed like at the time, that was supposed to be like the big culminating match where Roman did get the victory over Brock Lesnar. Now, Braun Strowman was out there the whole time, and I want to say the Shield guys came and they helped out Roman a little bit because it was right around that reunion and all that was happening. Regardless, that seemed like that was the big culmination of that character, and that was a huge moment for that character to kind of get over that hump. One of the underrated reasons why I think Roman had a little trouble getting over in that early period is they actually never went all the way with him. Even though he was super pushed, like they wouldn't give him these victories over Brock Lesnar. And I think that hurt him to some extent. Regardless, it was all supposed to be wrapped up in 2018. And I think you can say objectively that's better than what Shinsuke was doing. Now, I don't want to completely say that it was all good for Roman because Roman's year also ends on a very, very dark note as well. 2018 was the year that Roman Reigns, and we can almost remember this like it was yesterday. Okay, opened up Raw. You know, I think we had a Saudi show coming up, and just straight up tells us that he's been dealing with leukemia for all these years, and it's back. And at that moment, all of the animus towards Roman, all of talking about the booking and what they should and shouldn't do, and all that just felt completely irrelevant. One of the most surreal editions of Monday Night Raw ever, because there was no talk to it. The only thing I remember specifically is people talking that Roman had missed those house shows that weekend, which is pretty uncommon. But it was not like one of those situations where no one can get a hold of him or some of those other darker situations that we've seen in the past. He just simply missed some shows. And so that was a very down way from our perspective, and a very troubling way and sad way, obviously, for Roman and his family to wrap up 2018 from a wrestling perspective. Thankfully, as we know, Roman Reigns was able to come back just a few short months later. In fact, one of the great Raw moments ever. If one of the worst Raw moments ever, or heartfelt, or whatever you want to call it, just one of the gnarliest Raw moments ever is Roman announcing his diagnosis. One of the coolest Raw moments ever was saying he was in remission, because that was pretty awesome, and that was great. And that happened in the next year, but I do think that whole story had a happy ending to it. Wasn't the best way to spend your year, but was a little bit better than the guy who won the Rumble. And that was my list. The 5 Rumble winners that maybe had a better year. Blah, blah, blah. The 5 Royal Rumble runners up that maybe had a better year than the Royal Rumble winners. That was a tongue twister, but that was fun. Well, shoot. I actually went the full show length this time. You know me, I don't always don't always last too long. So I'm glad I got this figured out. Thank all of you for watching this week. I think I want to say this is probably the most viewers we've had on a regular live stream like this. I want to keep them going. I want to keep doing these shows. Again, I had to take a little bit of the week off last week. I was super busy the week prior, and that snowballed into it. But I do want to keep this consistent-ish schedule. I try to hit you up once a week with something that is relevant to what we're talking about in pro wrestling, or just something that you guys will be interested. So if I do any content around the Royal Rumble, the only way you'll know about that would be by subscribing to the channel and enabling those notifications.